through the front door, around the back, down through the window, off jumps Jack. Many people seem to be turned off by knitting. They seem to think that it's intimidating or uncool to do, when really it's very easy to learn and it's very fun to do. And though my grandmother did teach me, it has remained a great hobby of mine, and it's not just for our old grannies. See, many people of all different ages, genders, and cultures still enjoy knitting today as a hobby. And it only takes very basic skills to be able to be a very great knitter. But first I'd like to tell you some of the background history about knitting. So I know you're wondering, what exactly is knitting? Where did it come from? Many seem to think that knitting is just clinking the ends of two very large needles together that's attached to yarn in the hopes that fabric will just appear. This is very untrue. Many people also seem to get knitting, crocheting, and sewing mixed up, and they're not the same things at all. See, knitting is creating fabric using two pointed needles and yarn, while crocheting is only using one needle, and you're using loop patterns with both. But sewing is using a smaller needle and thread to sew things together or to create patterns such as cross-stitching. People used knitting to create fabric back in ancient times, and today people use knitting to make hats, scarves. You can make things from sweaters to socks to accessories of your choice. Be creative. And according to Olivia Gordon's Knitting, How It Began, the ancient Egyptians used a similar method around 380 known as nail binding. This was more of a knotting technique rather than loop technique, but this is where knitting came from originally. Knitting then evolved and it spread into Europe, and more stitches and patterns were created. See, with new patterns and stitches, you can create different designs. See, these are both a combination of purl and knit or garter stitch, and they're the exact same stitches, but you can see a very different design. Just like this one, this is just a garter stitch, and it's a very different design. It looks very different. This is also the normal garter or knit stitch. They're the same thing. Okay? So, the garter stitch was created around the 15th century, and since then other stitches have been created, of course, and this is how we have our different combinations of designs. So to teach you how to actually garter stitch, you're going to need to learn how to cast on. And today we're going to be doing the long tail cast on, because it's a very easy and basic way to start a project such as a scarf. So you're going to take your thread, alright, make sure you have a lot of length on your loose side, and you're going to create a loop as if you're creating a knot, but instead of pulling the loose end all the way through, you're just going to pull it into a little knot to create a loop. And once you have that loop, you slide it onto your needle, and making sure it's snug but not too loose and not too tight, because otherwise it could get pretty messy and hard to deal with. So, whichever way is more comfortable for you, whichever hand is more dominant, you'll want to hold your actual yarn, the loose yarn in. Okay, so to begin, you're going to take your yarn that's attached to your actual spool of yarn and drape it over your thumb, like so. And you're going to hold this down with your pinky and ring finger against your palm, and then hold the loose end with your forefinger and your middle finger. Okay, so get this as tight as you feel, and then pull the loop around the needle to the center of your palm. Okay, so now you're going to pull up, stick your needle through the loop, up through the loop around your thumb, bring it to the right of your palm, and back around the thread between your two fingers. Now you're going to pull that thread down back through the loop around your thumb, and then pull snug. One more time, around your thumb, holding down with your ring and pinky finger, holding the loose end with your middle and index finger, and then pulling it down to the center of your palm, up through the loop around your thumb, over to the right around the back of the thread between your two fingers, and then back down through the loop around your thumb. You can do this, create as many loops as you want. I find that with thicker thread that you won't need as many loops, but for today I'm just going to do about 10 loops. Okay, now making sure it's still snug but not too tight, not too loose. Now this is when the other needle comes in. Now you're going to have this extra piece of yarn, but you're going to ignore that. It might get in your way for a little while, but once you get length on your actual scarf, you're going to forget about it. So to begin your garter stitch, you want to use this needle to go up under the loop so that your new needle is resting under your needle with all the loops. Bring your thread attached to the spool, bring it around the back and down through the middle between the two needles. Okay, and now you want to pull that thread that you just wrapped around down through the original loop and then pull the original loop off. So one more time, in through the front door, around the back, down through the window, off jumps Jack. In through the front door, around the back, down through the window, off jumps Jack. And you're going to continue to repeat this process. And whoops, sometimes got to be careful. But usually if you make a mistake like that, it's pretty easy to correct it, because if you're paying attention to your loops, you'll know which row they're on and where they belong. And also it's easier with this colored yarn, you can tell kind of where you should be at. So you're going to continue that process. And now you are done with your first row. Okay. So again, you're just going to repeat this process until you have as much length as you want. And once you get the hang of it, like, you won't even need to be looking at it as much. It'll come as a second nature. It's very easy to learn, and you can even learn new stitches. So, as I finish this row, I'm going to teach you how to end a scarf. Okay? So, pulling it back like so. And as you would continue that, you would get more length. And just like this scarf. We're in the middle of a row here. And this is a different kind of needles. These are called circle needles. And it really depends on what you're comfortable with. I prefer the straight needles, I prefer wooden needles, the circle needles. It all depends on what kind of fabric you're using, what you're making. I find that making hats is easier to make with these circle needles, but it really depends. Once you get used to knitting, you'll be able to tell yourself. Okay, so this is the last row for this piece. And now I'm going to teach you how to end your actual scarf. Okay, so you're going to start doing the regular garter or knit stitch. So you have your first one. Do the same thing with the second one. But instead of continuing with your third, you're going to pick up your first knit loop and bring it over the second one and then pull that first one off. And again, you're going to knit this next one and then pull the second one off. Do it again and pull the third one off, which is now the first one. And just continue that process. And there you will have created your scarf in preserved culture, preserved art, and most importantly, you have made Granny proud. So, that is how you start, finish, create your scarf, a garter knit scarf. As Elizabeth Zimmerman once said, properly practiced knitting soothes the troubled spirit, and it doesn't hurt the untroubled spirit either. And this is, for me, knitting is therapeutic, it's fun, you can create perfect gifts for people, make your own design, make your own fashion styles, etc. And if you would like to learn more and practice knitting, there are plenty of books and websites to get steps, tricks, and tips to be a better knitter. Some include Knit Studio's channel on YouTube, Knitting Stitches and Designs for Dummies, Knitting for Dummies, New Stitch a Day, Knitting and Crochet video tutorials, which is also a channel on YouTube. And remember, when in doubt, knit a